Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 24 team selection. It's a big game week. It's a double game week, of course, and one of those interesting things where it's an option to really make moves into further Everton players. It's also an option to just simply go into targeting players who have good games coming up that aren't in Everton, right? So always the opportunity cost of getting the value of a double, trying to maximize around that, given that one of the games for Everton is actually really good with Leicester at home, versus that sort of medium to long-term opportunity, I suppose, of seeing past that immediate game and trying to sort of plan a little bit further ahead with your team. As far as myself, because I feel like I pigeonholed myself with the transfers last week and the unfortunate Dominic Calvert-Lewin injury, I have already made a move, and that move is already confirmed. It's DCL to NDIA. He's gotten a price rise. He's been in training, so I'm fortunate that I didn't move, I suppose, somehow from DCL to NDIA to Beto. But he's the option that I've gone with this week within a position that is quite weak within my team anyways. And right now, as I've been saying within some of the previous videos, planning to just continue with the 3-5-2 going forwards with my team structure. So starting with last week, a quick review of Game Week 23. It's one of those weeks where I think, yes, it was a bad week, but fortunately it wasn't like it had a gigantic impact on my rank. I think I was 7.3 million in terms of game week rank, 56 points. So did drop quite a fair bit, dropped to 72,000 in the world. Did make the moves that I wanted to make. And clearly, of course, the DCL injury was a huge, huge impact to my team in the medium to long term because it's so poor. So I went for Allison. Technically, that was -1 versus Flecken. The DCL move hurts more so in terms of that cost of the free transfer and what that has done for my team, because I would have really loved to have moved either one of Bruno or Odegaard to Mbumo. As we know, Odegaard was ill somehow, I don't know, twice in the span of a month. That really, really upset me. With Bruno, we're continuing to see. I'm literally watching right now United play, and he's been in the pivot all game long. We're seeing Mainu, for example, operating in even more advanced positions. That's just not exactly looking like a great hold with Odegaard. I guess you're even seeing something quite similar with Nwaneri playing super well. He's arguably someone who could be playing instead of, let's say, Saka or even Odegaard himself. And him, for example, getting a goal in the Champions League is funny, whilst Odegaard continues to give away penalties to people probably not so suited to them, like Sterling. Jorginho, I suppose there's the argument that Jorginho can take, but I also doubt Jorginho will play over the weekend, so it's not a huge impact. But Nwaneri is also on corners as well, and that's not great. As far as the actual team, though, in terms of performance, you know, nice to actually have a Munoz auto sub, I guess. Anything that wasn't 1 to 2 points, I was happy with. It was a really good game for Odegaard, and I'm quite upset that I did miss out on Wolves away. We do have Wolves away this week, though, with Rodgers, so hopefully we can rectify that. The yellow card wasn't really so welcomed with Rodgers and João Pedro, who both had relatively solid games on paper. Rodgers had a great game with West Ham at home. That was pretty disappointing, to be honest. But I think my biggest fear looking into Game Week 23 was whether Chris Wood was going to outscore a lot of the other options that I had decided to keep over him. And for the most part, I think I've survived. Chris Wood actually has a great week in Game Week 24, so I'm sure I'll suffer there, but I'm happy to sort of be woodless over the next 4 or 5 fixtures. And that's just simply me trying to maximize the fixtures around other elements of my team. And Isak, he's an interesting one where we have talked about Newcastle and their sort of run closing off soon. But he's just been playing so well. And the likely replacement for someone like Isak is probably someone like Jackson on Game Week 27, particularly for those who are minded to go for, let's say, a dead-end strategy. I myself, as I've been saying in some of these recent videos, I'm still very much open to keeping my options open. So the idea is either I am flexible to a free at 29. I'm also flexible towards a wildcard 34 type strategy where I'm ultimately looking to go through the free hit and hold that for a future blank game week as well. As far as, let's say, the rest of my team, I'm looking at very much happy owning Trent, Gabriel for the foreseeable. Munoz and Hall still looking pretty good value as well. Castagna, same with him. And when it comes to, let's say, the goalkeeper pair, yes, I've spent quite a fair bit of money on the goalkeeper pair, but I also have quite a reasonable amount of team value. And I think in this landscape where Bournemouth midfielders are so good, there's not really a gigantic need for team value at this moment in time. It's interesting, I suppose, that we have the Duran use on Watkins that actually improves his minutes. But structurally, I think I'd still probably shy away from having Watkins in my team, but time will tell whether that's the good idea or not. Otherwise, I think that's pretty much my Game Week 23 review. It was a very flat game week, but I'm still decently well set to not have an absolute awful game week in Game Week 24. But in reality, as I said within my transfer videos, I am expecting a red very much so, because I don't have or don't plan to use a chip in Game Week 24. This is a week where a lot of people will start to use their assistant manager chip, which I think is totally fair. I did a little bit of detailing in terms of how I would play the assistant manager chip over the next 3 weeks within my cheat sheet video. So do have a look at that if you're interested at all as to, let's say, maybe going for slot or going for Moyes and creating a strategy around that, because I do really think that free transfers are very much so needed if you plan to use the assistant manager strategy. If you are, for example, lacking in a system in free transfers, I would not really consider the idea of using the assistant manager now, unless you have some sort of major confidence, or maybe if we get, let's say, provisional double Game Week 25 news on Friday, as I'm recording on the Thursday evening, you might actually be incentivized to do that. Otherwise, that's pretty much the state of the landscape. There's a lot of players who've been doing quite well recently that I don't have in my team, right? And Mbumo is probably the big player of mine. Foden is someone who has done well, but I think ultimately is still somewhat I'd avoid, because I pretty much feel I've missed the boat. Other than that, I think the landscape is very much, no Gakpo as well, and I can't do anything about it, but neither do I really want to do anything about it, because I do think I've once again missed the boat with Ipswich at home, and that's that. So for Game Week 24, let's quickly shoot on over to the sort of expected numbers for this week, and what we can kind of look to profit from 11ify this week. So he, as always, provides his own sort of model with Premier League predictions. We're looking at the Premier League predictions for Game Week 24, and just looking at sort of some of the predicted data in terms of expected goals conceded, and other odds like clean sheets. From a defensive point of view, clearly this is still actually surprisingly quite a good week to own Arsenal defense. I'd say whenever you've historically seen a team like Arsenal face off versus a team like City, I mean, in seasons past, that would never have been anywhere near 40% odds. 36% is really, really good. It just shows that I think ultimately models and markets have very much shifted against Man City and their sort of historical performance. The Club Brugge performance was, I guess, solid in terms of the outcome of the game, but I still felt they played, for the most part, very poor, and not much has changed with Man City. And I don't think the transfers have necessarily rectified everything, right? Even that match versus Chelsea, I felt like more of an indictment, to be fair, on Chelsea and their overall performance than Man City reversing the tide of their recent runs. As far as, let's say, Bournemouth and Liverpool, showing to see, I think Bournemouth, such a good team. Clean sheet odds not very good for Liverpool. I do own Alisson, but it is a double, so we also get to factor in the second Liverpool versus Everton game, and that's obviously a much better game for Liverpool. Really, really good clean sheet odds there. Some of the best for this week on offer, just very much like Everton versus Leicester. So this is a week where, yes, I think you can actually be looking to invest quite heavily into Everton, because that Everton versus Leicester game is that good in the context of this game week alone. But if you actually have less free transfers, I can also completely see the appeal of ignoring Everton. And if you want to invest into Liverpool, I think that's totally fine, because you're investing into the best team in the league with a double. Outside of the key teams in the double, I would say what strikes out to me the most is the expected goals from that Chelsea game. So even though Chelsea have been playing pretty poor, still just a general expectation that West Ham is a team that you can profit from. And outside of that, I'd say pretty flat numbers for teams like United, teams like Spurs as well, showing just generally, I think, their recent decline in terms of performance, and how, let's say, a model has adjusted to that here, given that they are, with United at home and then Spurs away as well. Other than that, I think this is a relatively standard game week. It's a game week where a lot of teams have middling fixtures. No one has outrageously good games outside of maybe Everton. Some of the teams that we tend to, let's say, try to profit from, like Ipswich and Southampton, unfortunately are playing versus each other. And I would say it's not a week where, despite the double game week being there, I don't think it's a week where a lot of us are looking to bench boost. So that's sort of my initial take. As I said, I do think that the system manager has a lot of value this week, but it's probably one for managers who have set themselves up with free transfers so that they can actually, first of all, manipulate their team going forwards, maybe investing into more Bournemouth, whilst also spending free transfers on moving around managers between 24, 25, and 26 if necessary. So my general take was, if you go for someone like Moyes, you're probably going to use a transfer in 25. If you go for someone like Slot, you're probably going to use a transfer instead on 26. And Very likely, of course, if you use a transfer in Gameweek 25, that you also use a transfer in Gameweek 26 if you go for Moyes. Other than that, that's pretty much my take on the game week. I think the fixtures, as I said, are quite middling, but it's an opportunity to jump onto quite a few teams with a good run of games ahead. I think Arsenal is still very much a team that have a good run of games ahead, especially since we don't expect them to blank. With United, I think it's harder to sort of see the value into investing them. With Newcastle, we can start to see the start of the fixture decline for them. So it's a good opportunity to also move away from certain players as well, conversely. What I would say about my defense this week is I'm very much hedged towards what I can play. I don't really have a good bench this week when it comes to defense. One of the few weeks where that is the case. Simply put, Munoz has a pretty poor game. It is still United, and United have been really poor, but I'm still tempted to bench him. It's a lot easier for me to, I guess, buy into the idea that I'm playing at least the best defense in the Premier League with Gabriel here, and I've got Trent alongside him, plus Hall in a pretty good fixture when it comes to Fulham at home. In defense, I'll be playing Allison, and then moving on to the midfield, I'm planning to just simply rock a 3-5-2 structure. So Salah, Palmer, Bruno, Rodgers, Odegaard. That means I'm benching one of the forwards, which I'm sure you know who that is. The reason why I'm playing Rodgers here is, well, hopefully a little bit more rest. Buendia off as well, playing so well. Hopefully he just gets more minutes on the weekend, and he just has the much better fixture for me compared to João Pedro. As far as Bruno and Odegaard, it's hard to sort of see them play football, to be quite honest, compared to someone like Mbumo, who at least he's within attacking positions, I suppose. Even though he might not have key chances, he is there and thereabouts. And I'm very tempted, to be honest, to take a hit on Mbumo. I'll probably talk about that in a moment, because it's actually something that I have been considering. As far as Palmer and Salah, though, yeah, Palmer is a very easy hold. This is a good fixture for him. Yes, there are some middling fixtures in the distance for Palmer, but because Foden is someone who is probably the like-for-like replacement for Palmer for a lot of teams, I just don't see the value in moving from Palmer to Foden when he's got really poor games. And I'm willing to continue to take that L versus Foden. As far as Salah, this is a captaincy week. A lot of people will probably say, hey, if I'm not triple captaining, why should I captain Salah? And I think ultimately this is one of those situations where, for me, it's a case of damage control. My general expectation anytime Salah plays football is that if I look at a team like Liverpool, he's a player that I expect to get the most amount of points. I have tried in my past to go for things like rogue captaincies, like maybe Trent. I just don't think that that's a solid way to play. It's not defensive, but I think in the context of this game week, it is defensive. I think you're simply just trying to still maximize the amount of points provisionally with your team, and Salah captaining will do that. I'll still suffer against Salah, but I think I'll hopefully suffer less if he doesn't do very well, which is maybe possible, right? The Bournemouth away and Everton away fixtures aren't particularly good. I still think this is the triple captain game week for a lot of people to do so, because ultimately, if you're trying to rank the importance of every single chip within the game, triple captaincy in the context of this new assistant manager chip is less important still than it ever was. And so why not use it on a game week like this, where if you're not very intrigued with playing Assistant Manager 24 and you still have all your chips available to you, you're going to have to use your chips around some of these blanks and doubles. And the way the season is set up, I'd still say this is a season to free hit on a blank, but that's really up to you as a manager, and you can probably make the decision there. This is because we're just not going to have that many blanks and doubles. This was an unexpected double, and it's a good opportunity to use the triple captain on a doubler. As far as the forward, I'll be playing Ndiaye and Isak. The bench will then be João Pedro, Munoz, and Castagna in that order, with Flecken obviously spearheading the bench as well. As far as Ndiaye and Trent, I think this is one of those game weeks where you don't even have to really consider the vice captain too much. Trent is going to be my vice captain. Not much to be said about that. Ndiaye is someone that I'm looking forward to versus Leicester at home, very much so. And after that, not very much so ever again in FPL, to be quite honest. I just want him hopefully to get and maximize that result versus Leicester at home. Offer some of that value, the appearance points as well versus Liverpool, if I can take that, and then move on with my day. One Everton player, some people will be in a much better spot than me with Mykolenko and Pickford, and I completely recognize that this is a bad game week for myself. In the midfield, I've also got Bruno and Odegaard, and I don't love it, which is also why, as I said previously, I am planning to make a move on one of those two players. What I find interesting about the move towards Mbumo is it's hard to actually decide who to go from to actually move into Mbumo. I think that if I look at free at 29 as a strategy, because I've got so much value tied up in some of the Newcastle players, some of the Liverpool players as well. If I go for a free at 29 strategy, it probably does make sense for me to take a -4 from Bruno to Mbumo. Whereas if I go for, let's say, a wildcard 34 strategy, it actually probably makes sense for me to actually go from Odegaard to Mbumo. The reason why I say this is because Gameweek 29 is actually a really good United fixture. So there's more, I suppose, long-term value in being able to hold Bruno for that. Whereas if I free hit, I clearly don't even need to care about that. There is an Ipswich at home fixture on 27 for United, but it's also those fixtures in the distance for United that are really, really poor in the intermediate. Whereas Odegaard still has some pretty nice games. But if I am planning, let's say, a wildcard 34 strategy, I also have to take into account Gameweek 29, which is ultimately just a much better game for someone like Bruno. And it's not like Odegaard is an amazing player to own really within the distance, especially if I'm looking at him as a bit more of a long-term hold. After Leicester and West Ham, he becomes a sell regardless. So that's something to sort of mention. The counter, I suppose, to going for the hit this week is, well, I don't really care, or probably I shouldn't be caring about price rises so much at this point in the FPL season. I'm less likely to be impacted by price rises, but we never know, because it's very possible that Liverpool and Newcastle could double much later into the season, and team value therefore might become very important around that stage in the season again. Whereas right now, I'd say coming out of the double, it's less likely that we have so much importance placed over Liverpool and Newcastle players. So that's something to mention. So let me know what your thoughts are. I think one of the issues is that because I'm trying to keep myself open to both strategies, I think one of the simplest answers is to also just consider the idea of not taking the hit. Because if I don't take the hit, I don't commit to a strategy, and then I can make the decision a little bit later. Maybe I just end up actually going for a move like Odegaard to Mbumo on Gameweek 27 instead, and I do miss out some of those good fixtures, but at the same time, I maximize Odegaard's good fixtures. As I said, though, right now, it does seem like from a team value perspective that I could very much benefit from just hedging towards a free at 29 strategy. I could see some gain and some value from that. And Bruno also just is very, very dull, very, very flat as a player right now. Not just United as a team in general, but just positions that he's taking up in the pitch and what he's being asked to do to service the team. And so let me know what your thoughts are. Would you go Bruno or Odegaard out? What kind of chip strategy are you going for yourself? As I said, recently I've been very, very busy, so I really apologize that I haven't been able to respond to YouTube comments. Once again, I'm dedicating myself this Friday night to be able to respond to all of them for all the comments raised this week. So if you got any comments, feel free to drop them. Please do like and subscribe, as that really helps support the channel. Otherwise, have a good weekend. Take care. Goodbye, and I'll see you guys soon.